Section 12 of Beacon Lights of History, Volume 2, Jewish Heroes and Prophets, by John Lord. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by K. Hand. Solomon, Part 2. In one sense, Solomon left nothing to his nation but monuments of despotic power, and trophies of material civilization, which implied the decay of primitive virtues. He did not perpetuate his greatness; he did not even enlarge the boundaries of his kingdom. Like Louis XIV., he simply squandered a great inheritance. He did not leave his kingdom morally so strong as it was under David; it was even dismembered under his legitimate successor. The grand temple indeed remained the pride of every Jew, but David had bequeathed the treasures to build it. The national resources had been wasted in palaces and in court festivities, and although these had contributed to a material civilization, especially the sums expended on fortresses, aqueducts, reservoirs, and roads for the caravans, this civilization, so highly and justly prized in our age, may, under the peculiar circumstances of the Jews, and the end for which, by the Mosaic dispensation, they were intended to be kept isolated, have weakened those simpler habits and sentiments which favored the establishment of their religion. It must never be lost sight of that the isolation of the Hebrew race, unfavorable to such developments of civilization as commerce and the arts, was providentially designed, as is evidenced by the fact of accomplishment in spite of all obstacles, to keep alive the worship of Jehovah until the fullness of time should come, until the Messiah should appear to establish a new dispensation. The glory and grandeur of Solomon did not contribute to this end, but on the other hand favored idolatrous rites and corrupting foreign customs; and this is proved by the rapid decline of the Jews in religious life, patriotic ardor, and primitive virtues under the succeeding kings, both of Judah and Israel, which led ultimately to their captivity. Politically, Solomon may have added to the temporary power of the nation, but spiritually, and so fundamentally, he caused an eclipse of glory. And this is why his kingdom departed from his house, and he left a sullied name. Nevertheless, in many important respects, Solomon rendered great services to humanity, which redeemed his memory from shame and made him a truly immortal man, and even a great benefactor. He left writings which are still among the most treasured inheritances of his nation and of mankind. It is recorded that he spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005. Only a small portion of these have descended to us in the sacred writings, but they doubtless entered into the literature of the Jews. Enough remains, whenever they were compiled and collected, to establish his fame as one of the wisest and most gifted of mortals. And these writings, whatever may have been his backslidings, are pervaded with moral wisdom. Whether written in youth or in old age, on the summit of human glory or in the depths of despair, they are generally accepted as among the most precious gems of the Old Testament. His profound experience, conveyed to us in proverbs and songs, remains as a guide in life through all generations. The dignity of intellect shines triumphantly through all the obscuration of virtues. Thus do poets live even when buried in ignominious graves; thus do philosophers instruct the world, even though, like Seneca and possibly Bacon, their lives present a sad contrast to their precepts. Great thoughts emancipate the soul from age to age, while he who uttered them may have been enslaved by vices. Who knows what the private life of Shakespeare and Goethe may have been, but who would part with the writings they have left us? How soon the personal peculiarities of Coleridge and Carlyle will be forgotten, yet how permanent and healthy their utterances! It is truth, rather than man, that lives and conquers and triumphs. Man is nothing, except as the instrument of almighty power. Of the writings ascribed to Solomon there are 3 books, each of which corresponds to the different periods of his life, to his pious youth, to his prosperous manhood, and to his later years of cynicism and despair. They all alike blaze with moral truth, and appeal to universal experience. They present different features of human life, at different periods, and suggest sentiments which most people have realized at some time or another. And if in some cases they are apparently contradictory, like the Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, they are equally striking and convincing, and are not more inconsistent than the man himself. Who does not change, and yet remain individually the same? Is there not a change between youth and old age? Do not most great men utter sentiments hard to be reconciled with one another, yet with equal sincerity? Webster enforces free trade at one time and a high tariff at another, as light or circumstances change. Gladstone was in youth and middle age a pillar of the aristocracy; later he was the oracle of the masses, yet a lofty realism underlay all his utterances. The writings of Solomon present life in different aspects, and yet they are alike true. They are not divine revelations, like the commandments given to Moses amid the lightnings of Sinai, or like the visions of the prophets respecting the future glories of the Church. They do not exalt the soul into inspiring ecstasies like the Psalms of David, or kindle a holy awe like the lofty meditations of Job; but they are yet such impressive truths pertaining to human life that we invest them with more than human wisdom. The Song of Songs, long ascribed to King Solomon, has been attended with some difficulty of explanation. It is a poem liable to be perverted by an unsanctified soul, since it is foreign to our modes of expression. For 200 years it has been variously interpreted. It was the delight of Saint Bernard the ascetic, and a stumbling block to Ewald the critic. To many German scholars, who have rendered great services by their learning and genius, it is only the expression of physical love, like the amatory songs of Greece. To others of more piety yet equal scholarship, like Origen, Grotius, and Bossuet, it is symbolic of the love which exists between Christ and the Church. It seems at least to be a contrast with the impure love of the heathen world. But whether it describes the ardent affection which Solomon bore to his young Egyptian bride, or the still more beautiful love of the innocent Shulamite maiden for her betrothed shepherd, feeding his flock among the lilies, unseduced by all the influences of the royal court, and triumphant over the seductions of rank and power; or whether it is the rapt soul of the believer bursting out in holy transports of joy, like a Saint Teresa in the anticipated union with her divine spouse, it is still a noble tribute to what is most enchanting of the great certitudes on earth or in heaven, and it is expressed in language of exquisite and incomparable elegance. "Arise, my fair one, and come away, for the winter is past and gone, and the flowers appear on the earth, and the voice of the turtle is heard in the land. Make haste, my beloved. Be thou like a roe on the mountains of spices, for many waters cannot quench love, nor the floods drown it. Yea, were man to offer all that he hath for it, it would be utterly despised." How tender, how innocent, how fervent, how beautiful is this description of a lofty love at rest in its happiness, in the society of the charmer, exultant in the certainty of that glorious sentiment which nothing can corrupt and nothing can destroy. If this unique and beautiful song was the work of Solomon in his early days of innocence and piety, the Book of Proverbs seems to be the result of his profound observations when he was still uncorrupted by prosperity, ruling his kingdom with sagacity, and amazing the world with his wisdom. How many of those acute sayings were uttered by Solomon we know not, but probably most of them are his, collected, it is supposed, during the reign of Hezekiah. They are written on almost every subject pertaining to ethics, to nature, to science, and to society. Some are allusions to God, and others to the duties between man and man. Many are devoted to the duties of women, applicable to the sex in all times. They are not on a level of the Psalms in piety, nor of the prophecies in grandeur, but they recognize the immutable principles of moral obligation. In some cases they seem to be worldly wise, such as we might suppose to fall from the mouth of Benjamin Franklin or Cobbett, recognizing worldly prosperity as the greatest of blessings. Sometimes they are witty, again ironical, but always forcible. In some of them there is awful solemnity. There are no more terrific warnings and exhortations in the sacred writings than are found in the Proverbs of Solomon. The sins of idleness, of anger, of covetousness, of gossip, of falsehood, of oppression, of injustice, of intemperance, of unchastity, are uniformly denounced as leading to destruction, while prudence, temperance, chastity, obedience to parents, and loyalty to truth are enjoined with the earnestness of a man who believes in personal accountability to God. The ethics of the Proverbs are based on everlasting righteousness, and are imbued with the spirit of divine philosophy. Their great peculiarity is the constant exhortation to wisdom and knowledge, to which young men are especially exhorted. Like Socrates, Solomon never separates wisdom from virtue, but makes one the foundation of the other. He shows the connection between virtue and happiness, vice and misery. The Proverbs are inexhaustible in moral force, and have universal application. There is nothing cynical or gloomy in them. They form a fitting study for youth and old age, an incentive to virtue and a terror to evildoers, a thesaurus of moral wisdom. They speak in every line a lofty and comprehensive intellect, acquainted with all the experiences of life. Such moral wisdom would be imperishable in any literature. Such utterances go far to redeem all personal defects; they show how unclouded is a mind trained in equity, even when the will is enslaved by iniquity. What is still more remarkable, the Proverbs never apologize for the force of temptation, never blend error with truth. They uniformly exalt wisdom, and declare that the beginning of it is the fear of the Lord. There is not one of them which seeks to cover up vice with sophistical excuses. They show that the author or authors of them love moral beauty and truth, and exalt the same, as many great men with questionable morals give their testimony to the truths of Christianity, and utterly abhor those who poison the soul by plausible sophistries, as Lord Brougham detested Rousseau. The famous writings of our modern times which nearest approach the Proverbs in love of truth and moral wisdom are those of Bacon and Shakespeare. In striking contrast with the praises of knowledge which permeate the Proverbs is the book of Ecclesiastes, supposed to have been written in the decline of Solomon's life, when the pleasures of sin had saddened his soul and filled his mind with cynicism. Unless the book of Ecclesiastes is to be interpreted as ironical, nothing can be more dreary than many of its declarations. It even seems to pour contempt on all knowledge and all enjoyments. In much knowledge is much grief, and he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow. What profit hath a man of all his labor? There is no remembrance of the wise more than of the fool. There is nothing better for a man than that he should eat and drink. A man hath no preeminence over a beast; all go to the same place. What hath the wise man more than the fool? There is a just man that perisheth in his righteousness, and there is a wicked man that prolongeth his life in wickedness. One man among 1,000 have I found, but a woman among all those have I not found. The race is not to the swift, the battle to the strong, neither bread to the wise, nor riches to the man of understanding. On all things is written vanity. Such are some of the dismal and cynical utterances of Solomon in his old age. The Ecclesiastes, contrasted with the Proverbs, is discouraging and sad, although there is great seriousness and even loftiness in many of its sayings. It seems to be the record of a disenchanted old man, to whom all things are a folly and vanity. There is a suppressed contempt expressed for what young men in the worldly regard as desirable, equaled only by a sort of proud disdain of success and fame. There is great bitterness in reference to women. Some of the sayings are as mournful jeremiads as any uttered by Carlyle, showing great scorn of what 99 in 100 are vain of, and pursue after, as all ending in vanity and vexation of spirit. We can understand how riches may prove a snare, how pleasure seeking ends in disappointment, how the smiles of a deceitful woman may lead to the chamber of death, how the little treasures of wickedness profit, how sins will find out the transgressor, how the heart may be sad in the midst of laughter, how wine is a mocker, how ambition is Babel building, how he who pursueth evil pursueth it to his death. We can understand how abundance will produce satiety, and satiety lead to disgust; how disappointment attends our most cherished plans, and how all mortal pursuits fail to satisfy the craving of an immortal soul. But why does the favored and princely Solomon, in sadness and bitterness, pronounce knowledge also to be a vanity like power and riches, especially when in his earlier writings he so highly commends it? Is it true that in much wisdom is much grief, and that the increase of knowledge is the increase of sorrow? Can it be that the book of Ecclesiastes is the mere record of the miserable experiences of an embittered and disappointed sensualist? Or is it the profound and searching exposition of the vanities of this world as they appear to a lofty searcher after truth and God, measured by the realities of a future and endless life, which the soul, emancipated from pollution, pants and aspires after with all the intensity of a renovated nature? When I bear in mind the impressive lessons that are declared at the close of this remarkable book, the earnest exhortation to remember God before the dust shall return to the earth as it was, I cannot but feel that there are great moral truths underlying the sarcasm and irony in which the writer indulged. And these come with increased force from the mouth of a man who had tasted every mortal good, and found it all, when not properly used, a confirmation of the impossibility of earth to satisfy the soul of man. The writer calls himself the preacher, and surely a great preacher he was. not to a throng of fashionable worshippers, or to a crowd of listless pleasure seekers, but to all ages and nations. And if he really was a living speaker to the young men who caught the inspiration of his voice, how terribly eloquent he must have been! I fancy that I can see that unhappy old man, worn out, saddened, embittered, yet at last rising above the decrepitude of age and the infirmities which sin had hastened, and speaking in tones that could never be forgotten: "Behold ye, young men, I have tasted every enjoyment of this earth. I have indulged in every pleasure forbidden or permitted. I have explored the world of thought and the realm of nature. I have been favored beyond any mortal that ever lived. I have been flattered and honored beyond all precedent. I have consumed the treasures of kings and princes. I builded me houses, I planted me vineyards, I made me gardens and orchards, I made me pools of water. I got me servants and maidens, I gathered me also silver and gold. I got me men singers and women singers and musical instruments. Whatsoever my eyes desired, I kept not from them. I withheld not my heart from any joy, and now, lo, I solemnly declare unto you, with my fading strength and my eyes suffused with tears and my knees trembling with weakness, and in view of that future and higher life which I neglected to seek amid the dazzling glories of my throne, and the bewilderment of fascinating joys, I now most earnestly declare unto you that all these things which men seek and prize are a vanity, a delusion, and a snare; that there is no wisdom but in the fear of God." So this saddest of books ends with lofty exhortations, and recognizes moral obligations which are in harmony with the great principle enforced in the Proverbs, that there is no escape from the penalty of sin and folly, that whatsoever a man sows, that shall he also reap. The last recorded words of the preacher are concerning the vanity of life, that is, the hopeless failure of worldly pleasures and egotistical pursuits in themselves alone to secure happiness, the impossibility of lasting good disconnected with righteousness, the fact that even knowledge, the greatest possession and the highest joy which a man can have, does not satisfy the soul. These final utterances of Solomon are not dogmas or speculations, they are experiences, the experiences of one of the most favored mortals who has lived upon our earth, and one of the wisest. If measured by the eternal standards, his glory was less than that of the flower which withers in a day. What hope have ordinary men in the pursuit of pleasure or gain or honor? Utter vanity and vexation of spirit. Nothing brings a true reward but virtue, unselfish labors for others, supreme loyalty to conscience, obedience to God. Hence such profound experience so frankly published, such sad confessions uttered from the depths of the heart, and the summing up of the whole question of human life, enforced with the earnestness and eloquence of an old man soon to die, have peculiar force, and are among the greatest treasures of the Old Testament. The fundamental truth to be deduced from the book of Ecclesiastes is that whatever is born of vanity must end in vanity. If vanity is the seed, so vanity is the fruit. It is in fact one of the most impressive of all the truths that appeal either to consciousness or experience. If a man builds a house from vanity, or makes a party from vanity, or gives a present from vanity, or writes a book from vanity, or seeks an office from vanity, then as certainly as the bite of an asp will poison the body, will the expected good be turned into bitter disappointment. Self love cannot be the basis of human action without alienation from God, without weariness, disgust, and ultimate sorrow. The soul can be fed only by divine certitudes; it can be enlarged only by walking according to the divine commandments. Confucius, Socrates, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius declared the same truths, but not so impressively. Not for one's self, not for friends, not even for children alone must one live. There is a higher law still which speaks to the universal conscience, asking, "What is your duty?" With this is identified all that is precious in life, on earth or in heaven, for time and eternity. Anything in this world which is sought as a good, whose end is selfish, is an impressive failure, so that self aggrandizement becomes as absurd and fatal as self indulgence. One can no more escape from the operation of this law than he can take the wings of the morning and fly to the uttermost parts of the sea. The commonest experiences of everyday life confirm the wisdom which Solomon uttered out of his lonely and saddened soul. If ye will not hear him, Be instructed by your own broken friendships, your own dispelled illusions, your own fallen idols; by the heartlessness which too often lurks in the smiles of beauty, by the poison concealed in polished flatteries, by the deceitfulness hidden beneath the warmest praises, by the demons of envy, jealousy, and pride, which take from success itself its promised joys. Who is happy with any amount of wealth? Who is free from corroding cares? Who can escape anxiety and fear? How hard to shake off the burdens which even a rich man is compelled to bear! There is a fly in every ointment, a skeleton in every closet, solitude in the midst of crowds, isolation in the joy of festivals. The wrecks of happiness are strewn in every path that the world has envied. Read the lives of illustrious men. How melancholy often are the latter days of those who have climbed the highest! Caesar is stabbed when he has conquered the world. Diocletian retires in disgust from the government of an empire. Godfrey languishes in grief when he has taken Jerusalem. Charles V. shuts himself up in a convent. Galileo, whose spirit has roamed the heavens, is a prisoner of the Inquisition. Napoleon masters a continent, and expires on a rock in the ocean. Mirabeau dies of despair when he has kindled the torch of revolution. The poetic soul of Burns passes away in poverty and moral eclipse. Madness overtakes the cool satirist Swift, and mental degeneracy is the final condition of the fertile minded Scott. The high souled Hamilton perishes in a petty quarrel, and curses overwhelm Webster in the halls of his early triumphs. What a confirmation of the experience of Solomon! Vanity of vanities write on all walls, in all the chambers of pleasure, in all the palaces of pride. This is the burden of the preaching of Solomon; but it is also the lesson which is taught by all the records of the past, and all the experiences of mankind. Yet it is not sad when one considers the dignity of the soul and its immortal destinies. It is sad only when the disenchantment of illusions is not followed by that holy fear which is the beginning of wisdom, that exalted realism which we believe at last sustained the soul of the preacher as he was hastening to that country from whose bourne no traveller returns. End of Section 12.